Hey everybody, welcome back. We are going to do, for episode 5, an exploration of some of the player mechanics that we know as annoying habits, right? So we're going to look at 3 specifically. One is called fudging rolls. That is where we roll one thing and then report something different. And that can actually be on the part of either the DM or the player. Next, we're going to take a look at a phenomenon known as min-maxing, in which a player attempts to show their true colors by taking advantage of every statistical weakness in the system that they're playing in. And then we're also going to take a look at rules lawyering. Rules lawyering, of course, is, again, a way of exploiting the game system, but it makes the game less fun because somebody who doesn't know the rules as well, or who isn't interested in technicalities but more is interested in immersion, may end up having their game delayed or their immersion broken by somebody who's getting too caught up in the rules. So we'll take a look at each of those things in turn, and we'll talk some examples of those.
All right, Jack, I'm going to need you to make an athletics check.
All right, athletics check, let's do it.
Natural 20?
Yeah, you succeed, I guess.
Perfect.
It was a little bit difficult to see, but Shaq was prompted to roll an athletics check, and then he rolled something that wasn't a nat 20 and told the DM that it was a nat 20. The DM, not having any reason to disbelieve Shaq, didn't check to see what the roll was. Instead, he kept the game moving and accepted that Shaq had rolled a nat 20. So in this case, we see that the player has decided to fudge a roll for whatever reason. Maybe it was a roll that was important to his character. Maybe it was a roll that he just really didn't want to fail. Often it's really for no reason at all, and actually the consequences of embracing a failure can be really hilarious and one of the best parts of the game. Let's look at another example.
All right, Shaq, I'm going to need you to roll me just a straight intelligence at advantage.
All right, I got this.
Okay. That's a 11?
All right, that passes.
Example, Shaq is asked to roll a check with advantage. And advantage is when you roll 2 d20s and you take the highest roll. We saw in the video that Shaq did not roll his 2 d20s and may have succeeded even better without fudging the roll that he actually reported, right? We saw that he rolled a 6 and reported an 11. And so had he actually rolled his second d20, he may not have had to feel like he needed to fudge his roll. So it's just a question in this case of integrity. Shaq should have asked a question if he was unclear. The DM is there to answer questions if you're unclear about something. And then in this case, as a DM, if I saw a player who was rolling but did not accept that I said, hey, you can roll that with advantage, I would probably mention, hey, I said you could roll that with advantage, go ahead and roll another, especially if they failed. In this case, because Shaq reported that he got an 11, he passed, and the DM thought nothing of it and continued on the game. But as the DM, you're really there not just to tell the story, but also to train your players, especially if you have inexperienced players. And in this case, Shaq was playing the part of an inexperienced player, even though Shaq, my friend, is a very experienced player.
All right, guys, the guard attacks you, Steven, and he's using a long sword, double-handed. He's going to do 10 points of slashing.
That's
Oh, that's a lot. Okay.
In this case, we have the DM fudging a roll. We have probably a very early on party. A guard is attacking them, presumably for stealing somebody's sweet roll. And we see that the DM rolls 3 die, and it's difficult to see how he arrives at the damage number that he arrives at. And the player's reaction is actually a little bit of fear, right? Because that's a lot of damage for him as an early game player. And so he responds a little bit incredulous, wondering what's going to happen in this fight. Immediately, the fear of death is put into him. And so this is a move that a DM can make in certain situations, but a DM also must be aware that anytime you're fudging rolls, if the player feels like you've been unfair, they're going to hold a grudge or possibly hold back on some of the things that they would have otherwise done in a fully immersed game where they understand or feel like they understand the rules. Let's look at our next example of a bad habit.
All right. So Tony, you're up. The ooze is 10 feet in front of you. What do you do?
Excellent. Well, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my rage, and I'm going to get raging, and then I'm going to take that axe that you gave me, the axe of multi-attack, and I'm going to break it down to give me my 5 attacks with the axe of multi-attack. So here's one for 18, one for 20, one for 25, one for 32, and another for 18. Do all those hit?
Yeah.
Okay, so then I'm going to boost my. Can you give me guidance? I'm going to boost
Sure.
my attack for each of those by 1d6. You have an extra d6?
Yeah, I got
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Here you go.
All right, so I'm going to boost those by 1d6, so that's 100 damage, and that is 120, and that is 87, and that is 52, and that one is 77. So is the ooze dead?
No.
Okay.
First off, you're doing slashing damage, so you've just made a million tiny oozes.
Oh.
Secondly, I need to see that weapon.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna
Like,
just
let me see the stats on that weapon, please.
Okay. But before I show you that, I'm just gonna can I just go back and I'll cast a wall of fire around
No.
the ooze? No. Okay. We see an example of the consummate min-maxer, somebody who is really focused on getting maximum damage out of their character, regardless of how it plays in the actual story, right? I, in that clip, am really focused on doing as much damage as possible without actually even considering the lore surrounding goo, where Jesse, the DM, reports to me, hey, you actually just created a whole bunch of extra enemies, even though you did a lot of damage to the primary enemy that you started with. And in addition, I've sort of tipped my hand in that I'm using something that the DM gave me to a really brutal advantage without actually taking into account that I'm breaking his game if he lets me go through with this. So it's a really egregious example. And right there at the end, if you've been watching the rest of the series, you might have noticed that I tried to walk it back and retcon the whole thing so that I could take advantage of the lore surrounding ooze. But I was not enabled to because the DM put his foot down, which is what you should do exactly when something like that is happening. Shaq was incredulous sitting across the table from this. He didn't know what to do because all of a sudden I was going real fast. I was trying to get away with a lot, and he just didn't have a frame of reference for this kind of behavior. So it's something that if you are ever really, really focused on getting a specific kind of advantage, and you really don't take into account the lore of anything at all, that's min-maxing. And it really is game breaking because you're exploiting various things in the game to get some kind of advantage. And let me take you. Let me give you a philosophical point of view that should guide everything you do in your social D&D playing, and that is you cannot win at D&D, right? The winning is in the playing, right? So having the most powerful character, having the biggest, the baddest, the most persuasive character is only going to break the game for everybody else, and people will stop playing with you. So I want to encourage you, avoid min-maxing, and certainly avoid the kind of behavior we saw in this clip. Let's look at the next clip.
Okay, Shaq. The dragon's gonna fireball you. And you take 8d6 of damage for 48.
Okay, that will kill me, but by rules standards, it's disadvantage because I'm already laying on the ground. So that means you should roll at disadvantage, but also it wouldn't be 2 death saves. It'd be 1 because you're 10 feet away, and you said you moved back. So I mean that means you can't get me that close, and plus you're supposed to have disadvantage.
Okay, I'll roll disadvantage. I'm sorry, I forgot about that. Yeah, that one misses.
Thank you.
See a really egregious example of rules lawyering, right? So Shaq is trying to use the rules as his ally in order to get out of a death. And actually, in this case, the DM allows him to do it, which is not advisable. You never want to let a player get away with something like this unless you truly are wrong and it truly is blatantly obvious. The number one rule in the books is that the DM is always right. So you need to make sure that you tamp down on rules lawyering, and you can set that expectation ahead of time in your game that if you make a ruling, that is the ruling, and you can talk about it later in terms of whether or not it stands or whether or not there's some kind of compensation that's due to a player. But you never want a player at the table to begin to think that this is acceptable behavior. All right, that's the end of this episode. I do have a little bonus for you at the end here, but thanks y'all for watching, and we'll see you for the next one.
All right, Shaq. How about you give me a strength save?
All right.
You're crapping me.
Are you serious? That's hilarious.
Okay.